I will tell you the story which I heard when I was a little girl. Every time I thought of the story, it seemed to me to become more and more charming, for it is with stories as it is with many people, they become better and better the older they grow, and that is so delightful. You have been in the country, of course. Well then, you must have seen a very old farmhouse with a thatched roof, and mosses and weeds growing wild upon it. There is a stork's nest on the ridge of the roof, for we can't do without the stork. The walls of the house are aslant, and the windows low, and only one of the latter is made so that it will open. The baking oven sticks out of the wall like a little fat body. The elder tree hangs over the paling, and beneath its branches at the foot of the paling is a little pond with a duck and some ducklings under a knotted old willow tree. There is a yard dog too, who barks at every passer-by. Well, there was just such a farmhouse out in the country, and in it dwelt the old couple, a peasant and his wife. Small as was their property, there was one of their possessions that they could do without, a horse, which managed to live on the grass it found in the ditch by the side of the high road. The old peasant rode it to town, and often his neighbours borrowed it, and rendered the old couple some service in return for the loan. But still they thought it would be best if they sold the horse or exchanged it for something that might be more useful to them. But what was it to be? "You'll know that best, old man," said the wife. "It is fair day today, so ride to town and get rid of the horse for some money, or make a good exchange. Whatever you do will be right to me. Ride off to the fair." And she tied his neckerchief for him, for she could do that better than he could, and she tied it in a double bow and made him look quite smart. Then she brushed his hat round and round with the palm of her hand and gave him a kiss. So he rode away on the horse that was to be sold or exchanged for something else. Yes, the old man knew what he was about. The sun shone hot, and there was not a cloud in the sky. The road was very dusty, for many people who were all bound for the fair were driving or riding or walking upon it. There was no shade anywhere from the burning sun. Among the rest, a man was going along driving a cow to the fair. The cow was as pretty as a cow could be. "She gives good milk, I'm sure," thought the peasant. That would be a very good exchange, the cow for a horse. "Hello, you there with the cow," he said. "Let's have a word together. I fancy a horse costs more than a cow, but I don't mind that. A cow would be more useful to me. If you like, we'll exchange." "To be sure I will," said the man with the cow, and so they exchanged. So that was settled, and the peasant might as well have turned back, for he had done the business he came to do. But as he had once made up his mind to go to the fair, he thought he'd go all the same, if only to have a look at it, and so he went on to the town with his cow. Leading the cow, he strode on briskly, and after a short time he overtook a man who was driving a sheep. It was a fine, fat sheep, well covered with wool. "I should like to have that," said our peasant to himself. "It would find plenty of grass by our fence, and in winter we could have it in the room with us. Perhaps it would be more practical to have a sheep instead of a cow. Shall we change?" The man with the sheep was quite ready, and the exchange was made. So our peasant went on along the high road with his sheep. Soon he saw another man who came into the road from a field carrying a big goose under his arm. "That's a heavy bird you have there. It has plenty of feathers and plenty of fat, and would look well tied by a string in our pond at home. That would be something for my old woman to save up for her scraps for. How often she has said, if only we had a goose. Now perhaps she can have one, and if possible, it shall be hers. Shall we exchange? I'll give you my sheep for your goose, and say thank you into the bargain. The other man had no objections, so they exchanged, and our peasant got the goose. By this time he was very near the town. The crowd on the high road became greater and greater, and there was quite a crush of men and cattle. They walked in the road and close by the palings, and at the toll gate they even went into the toll keeper's potato field, where his only hen was strutting around with a string to her leg, lest she should take fright at the crowd and run away and get lost. She had short feathers on her tail and winked with one eye. She looked very cunning. Cluck, cluck, said the hen. What she meant by it I cannot tell you, but directly our good man saw her, he thought, that's the finest hen I've ever seen in my life. Why, she's finer than our parson's brood hen. Upon my word, I should like to have that hen. A fowl can always find a grain or two. She can almost keep herself. I think it would be a good exchange if I could get that for my goose. Shall we exchange? He asked the toll keeper. Exchange? Said the man. Well, that wouldn't be a bad thing. And so they exchanged, and the toll keeper got the goose, and the peasant got the hen. Now he had done a good deal of business on his way to town, and he was hot and tired. He must have a drop of brandy and a bit to eat. And soon he was in front of the inn. He was just about to go in when the ostler came out, and they met in the doorway. The ostler was carrying a sackful of something on his back. What have you there? Said the peasant. Rotten apples, answered the ostler. A whole sackful of them. Enough to feed the pigs with. Why, that's terrible waste. I wish my old woman at home could see that lot. Last year the old tree by the turf stack only bore a single apple, and we kept it in the cupboard till it was quite rotten and spoiled. It's something, anyhow, my old woman said, but here she could see any quantity, a whole sackful. Yes, I should be glad to show her that. What will you give me for the sackful? Asked the ostler. What'll I give? I'll give you my hen in exchange. And so he gave him the hen and got the apples, which he carried into the bar parlour. He stood the sack carefully by the stove and then went to the table. But the stove was hot. He had not thought of that. There were many strangers in the room, horse dealers, drovers, and 2 Englishmen. And the 2 Englishmen were so rich that their pockets were bursting with gold. And they were making bets too, just as they are always supposed to. Hiss, hiss. What was that by the stove? The apples were beginning to roast. What's that? Why, don't you know? Said our peasant. And he told the whole story of the horse that he had exchanged for a cow and all the rest of it, right down to the apples. Well, your old woman will give it you well when you get home, said the Englishman. There'll be a pretty row. What? She'll give me what? Said the peasant. She will kiss me and say, what the old man does is always right. Shall we have a bet? Said the Englishman. We'll wager gold by the ton, 100 pounds to the 100 weight. A bushel will be enough, said the peasant. I can only set the bushel of apples against it, and I'll throw in myself and my old woman into the bargain, and that's piling up the measure, I should say. Done. And so the bet was made. The innkeeper's cart was brought out, and the Englishman got in, and the peasant got in, and the rotten apples, and away they went, and soon they reached the peasant's little farm. Good evening, old woman. Good evening, old man. Well, I've made the exchange. Yes, you know what you're about, said the woman, and she put her arms around him, paying no attention to the strangers, nor did she notice the sack. I've got a cow in exchange for the horse, said he. Heaven be thanked, she said. What lovely milk we shall have now, and butter and cheese on the table. That was a most capital exchange. Yes, but I changed the cow for a sheep. Why, that's better still, said the old woman. You always think of everything. We have just grass enough for a sheep. Use milk and cheese and woolen stockings and even woolen jackets too. The cow cannot give those, and her hairs will only come off. How you think of everything. But I gave away the sheep for a goose. Then this year we shall really have roast goose to eat, my dear old man. You are always thinking of something to give me pleasure. How lovely that is. We can let the goose walk about with a string to her leg, and she'll grow fatter still before Michaelmas. But then I exchanged the goose for a hen, said the man. A hen? That was a good exchange, replied the woman. The hen will lay eggs and hatch them, and we shall have chickens. We shall have a whole poultry yard. Oh, that's just what I was wishing for. Yes, but then I exchanged the hen for a sack of rotten apples. Well, now I must really kiss you for that, exclaimed the wife. My dear, good husband. Now I'll tell you something. Do you know, you had hardly left me this morning before I began thinking how I could give you something very nice this evening. I thought it should be pancakes with savoury herbs. I had eggs and bacon too, but I wanted herbs, so I went over to the schoolmaster's. They have herbs there, I know, but his wife is a mean woman, though she looks so sweet. I begged her to lend me a handful of herbs. Lend, she answered. Nothing at all grows in our garden, not even a rotten apple. I could not even lend you a rotten apple, but now I can lend her 10, a whole sackful even, that I'm very glad of. That makes me laugh. And with that she gave him a good smacking kiss. I like that, said both the Englishmen together. Always going downhill and always happy. That's easily worth the money. So they paid a bushel of gold to the peasant, who had not been cuffed but kissed. Yes, it always pays when the wife always sees and says that her husband is the wisest, and that whatever he does is right. You see, that's my story. I heard it when I was a child, and now you've heard it too. And know that what the old man does is always right.